Here. Welcome back to the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. So we're picking up our work that we started yesterday, doing our walkthrough of S135, the Vermont Saves Bill. And, could you introduce yourself and pick us up where we left off?
Legislative Council. So S135 is an act relating to the establishment of Vermont Saves. We left off yesterday on page 7 in the section that was establishing the program. We are in subsection C under the contributions. And I think we left off in subdivision 2 with the treasurer having the authority to increase the contribution rates each year to 8%, but not less than 1%, with the option for the participants to opt out of that or increase or decrease that annual increased amount. In subdivision 3 on line 11, the treasurer is required to provide for direct deposits of contributions into investments under the program. Subdivision 4, the contributions by the covered employer is not required or permitted to make contributions into the program for employees, and that is a requirement to avoid this being implicating ERISA. So then bottom of page 7, subdivision 5, this language says that the participant owns the contributions and any earnings and the amounts that are contributed to their account under the program, and the state and the employer have no proprietary interest in those contributions or earnings. Top of page 8, the administration of the program. The treasurer is tasked with administering and implementing the Vermont Saves program. The treasurer can contract with a vendor to administer the program and manage the investments pursuant to certain conditions. So the first under subdivision 1 on line 5, the program has to be designed and implemented in a manner that is consistent with federal law and consistent, not preempted by, and the payroll deduction IRAs and covered employees not being subject to ERISA.
There's a comma there before ERISA. Is that supposed to be there? So it's not being preempted by ERISA, but it's with, so the clause breaks up the program not being, okay.
Yeah, so I think it's saying that the program has to be consistent with federal law to the extent that it applies, and that the program has to be consistent with and not preempted by, as well as the payroll deduction IRAs and covered employers not being subject to ERISA. In subdivision 2, this deals with the costs and expenses of administering the program. So the costs incurred to initiate, implement, maintain, manage, and administer the program and its investments are paid or defrayed from the investment returns or assets of the program, or through fees or charges that the treasurer is authorized to charge, as long as that is consistent with federal and state law. And there is a subsection we'll get to on fees. Subdivision 3, the treasurer is responsible for establishing a number of processes and requirements to administer the program. So these include processes for enrollment and contributions to the IRA under the program. That includes things like withholding by covered employers of employee payroll deductions from their wages, automatic enrollment in payroll deduction, opt-outs for covered employees, including self-employed individuals and independent contractors, making default contributions using the default investment and participant selection of, they select an alternative contribution rate or amount and alternative investments from those that are offered under the program. The treasurer also has to establish processes for phasing in enrollment of eligible individuals, including phasing in enrollment of covered employees by the size or type of that covered employer, processes for a participant that wants to make non-payroll contributions to accounts under the program, as well as for an employer to be determined to be exempt from the program because they already sponsor a specified tax favored retirement plan. And then finally, requirements for whether, to determine whether a part-time, seasonal, or temporary employee is a covered employee for the purposes of the program. In subsection E, under records and accounting, this requires the treasurer to maintain separate records and accounting for each account under the program. It also says that participants should be allowed to maintain their account regardless of place of employment and roll over their funds into other IRAs or other retirement accounts. So there's that portability aspect. Top of page 10, subsection F. Under reports, the treasurer is required to send an annual report to participants that gives the details of their and status of their account. And participants are also required to have frequent or continual online access to the information on their account. The treasurer in subsection G has certain outreach and disclosure requirements under the program. So the treasurer has to conduct outreach to individuals, employers, and other stakeholders, as well as the public regarding the Vermont Saves program, including the content, the frequency, timing, means of required disclosures from the program to covered employees, participants, and any other individuals who are eligible to participate, covered employers, and other interested parties. In subsection H, under participant accounts, subdivision 1 says that the interest and earnings, as well as losses, shall be allocated to each participant's individual retirement account. Subdivision 2 also says that the participant's benefit under the program is equal to the balance in their individual retirement account as of any applicable measurement date that's set by the program. In subsection I, the program assets, and please stop me if I'm going too fast or there's questions.
Right. Maybe if you're confused or have any questions, feel free to get a hand up. I'll try to answer.
For the program assets, the treasurer is authorized to establish a trust or custodial account to hold those assets. Any trust established for this purpose is considered an instrumentality of the state and is not subject to ERISA. So now on the top of page 11, subdivision 2 on line 4 clarifies that the assets that are in the program or the fund that is set up under this chapter are not to be transferred to the general fund or any other fund of the state or otherwise encumbered for any other purpose. In terms of contributions in subdivision 3, all contributions to an IRA under the program shall be used only to pay benefits to participants, to pay for the cost of administering the program, or to make investments for the benefit of the program. And then finally in this section is subsection J, the fees. The treasurer is authorized to charge a fee to participants to defray the costs of administering the program. The treasurer can determine the amount and method of collection of that fee. However, the fee is set at an amount not to exceed $30 per participant in each calendar year. And then subdivision 2 clarifies that no employer is required to fund or be responsible for collecting those fees from participants. And section 533 sets forth the duties of the treasurer under this chapter. So the treasurer is authorized to adopt a number of rules in order to implement and administer the program. These rules include on page 12, just so you're following along. In subdivision A on line 3, rules on the distribution of funds from the program and promoting that portability of benefits, which includes making tax-free rollovers to another IRA or tax qualified plan, as well as for participants' initial contributions, the up to a specified dollar amount or a specified period of time. Those that are required to be invested in a principal preservation investment or must be defaulted into such investment unless that participant opts out of that for a different investment. The treasurer is authorized under this section to enter into any contracts and agreements or partnerships with other governmental entities, and that includes other states or agencies or instrumentalities of the state to establish that already have or maintain a compatible program to pool investments, whether they're funds of other states' programs with which the assets of the program and the trust are permitted by law to be collectively invested. And this is to allow, to the extent necessary, for efficiency in the administration and implementation for this program. On top of page 13, the treasurer is authorized to use a sole source or simplified bid process in order to enter into those contracts. The treasurer can also enter into contracts with financial institutions, or trustees, record keepers, investment managers, advisors, and other professionals to service the retirement program. Subdivision 4, the treasurer can establish criteria and guidelines for the program in order to offer qualified retirement investment choices. The treasurer has to ensure that the program is designed with best practices for retirement savings accounts and avoid preemption of the program by federal law. In subdivision 6, the treasurer is authorized to apply for and accept any grants or gifts or other loans or funds from the state or any other entity to defray program costs. The treasurer is also tasked with evaluating whether insurance against any loss in connection with the property or assets or activities of a program is necessary. Top of page 14, the treasurer's office is required to enter into an agreement with the tax department to facilitate checking program eligibility for employers and employees. And they are allowed to share tax return information under this agreement so that they can verify wages to determine that somebody is eligible to be covered by the program. The treasurer in section 9 is also authorized to enter into intergovernmental agreements with any agency or instrumentality of the state to receive any outreach, technical assistance, or enforcement or compliance services in order to administer the program. In subdivision 10, the treasurer has fiduciary duties with respect to the program. So the program is solely in the interest of the participants for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to participants and defraying reasonable expenses of administering the program. The treasurer, the fiduciary duty includes acting with care, skill, prudence, and diligence under the circumstances that then prevailing that a prudent person acting in a like capacity and familiar with those matters would use in the conduct of a similar type of program. Page 15, section 534 establishes the Vermont Retirement Security Fund. Subsection A says that this fund is to be administered by the state treasurer. The fund will consist of monies appropriated to it by the General Assembly, any money that's transferred to it from the federal government or other state agencies or any other governmental source. The fund will also include any money from the payment of fees, penalties, and any other money that's due to the program, as well as any gifts, grants, or donations made to the fund or to received by the treasurer. The interest and income derived from the deposit and investments of money in the fund is credited to the fund, and any unexpended and unencumbered monies at the end of a fiscal year remain. On page 16 in section 535, there's a penalty structure set up for an employer that fails to enroll a covered employee without reasonable cause. So this is set up sort of by under a timeline of a maximum penalty that's not done by a certain date. So prior to October 1st, 2025, that maximum penalty per covered employee is $10. Between October 2025 and ending September 30th, 2026, that increases to $20. And then after October 1st, 2026, that maximum penalty increases to $75 per employer. In subsection B, so I'm on line 15, page 16, the treasurer is authorized to establish a rule that would waive this penalty for covered employees that fail to enroll a covered employee. If it is established that the employer didn't know that the failure existed and exercised reasonable diligence to meet the requirements of the chapter, the rule has to provide that no penalty shall be imposed on any failure for which it is established that the employer did not know that the failure existed and exercised reasonable diligence to meet the requirements. And no penalty shall be imposed on any failure if the covered employer exercised reasonable diligence to meet those requirements they complied with the requirements for each employee by the end of a 90-day period, starting from the date that they learned of the failure, that the failure existed. And then in the case of a failure that is due to reasonable cause and not willful neglect, the treasurer may waive all or part of the penalty to the extent that that penalty would be considered excessive or otherwise inequitable.
So when I asked Becky to pause here, does anybody have any questions or heartburn about the penalty section? It's my impression, and if I'm mistaken, Becky or Gavin, tell me, but that the penalties are pretty minimal. The idea here is that, this is a mandatory thing, but we're not trying to punish employers who, forget or fail to enroll. And this 90-day kind of warning period gives them the ability, it's almost like a fix-it ticket. It's like, your employee's not enrolled. Oh, okay, you have 90 days to get them enrolled, and then there aren't any penalties. Is that a good understanding?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I'll just add that what we've heard from other states is that there have been no enforcement actions, no sort of civil enforcement actions. That the most anyone's had to do is sort of send a letter.
Do you mind introducing yourself for the record?
I'm sorry, Gavin Boyles, Deputy Treasurer.
And I've just on that, like I've highlighted twice as we're going through I'm going through a hard copy, is like, without reasonable cause is said twice, right? So that's
yeah, the idea, I want to make sure that just, when we're having, this goes out on the floor and everything, that we've all just had the conversation that there are penalties in here and it is mandatory, but the idea is just to get everybody to comply. It's pretty consultative rather than.
I have a question, I guess, and that's, maybe it was in here and I apologize for arriving late. But is there one specific application form that's going to all employers? And so they'll know about it, they'll know what they need to present to the new employee right off the bat?
Yeah, it's a good question. There will be sort of two options, is my understanding from the vendors that work in this space. That first option is an interactive website. So you as the employer will enter your name, how large you are, you can then either import or just type in the names and social security numbers and information of your employees, or there'll be a paper application. I think the preference, just for ease on everyone's side, is the web application. But yes, and a paper notice will go out to all employees as well, employers.
Great.
I imagine the treasurer's office is not intending to kind of hide this program. It's probably going to be
Absolutely not.
pretty widely publicized. It's been. All right, everybody good on the penalty sections before we go on? Thank you, Becky.
So on page 17, section 536, there is a section on protection from liability for both the employer and the state. So subsection A deals with the employer protections from liability. And it says that a covered employer is not considered a fiduciary with respect to the program and not liable for or shall not bear responsibility for an employee's decision to participate in or opt out of the program, any of the participants' investment decisions, and the administration, investment, returns or performance of the program, including the interest rate or rate of return on any contribution. The employer isn't liable for the program design or the benefits that are paid to participants. In subdivision E, just highlighting that the employer is not responsible for an individual's awareness of or compliance with conditions and other provisions of the tax law that determine which individuals are eligible to make contributions to an IRA, in what amount and what time frame and manner, as well as any losses or failure to realize any gains or other adverse consequences that result from participating in the program. And then with respect to the state in subsection B, both the treasurer and the program have no responsibility for compliance by individuals with the conditions and provisions of the Internal Revenue Code that determine whether an individual is eligible to participate, make tax favored contributions to an IRA, in what amount and in what time frame and manner. The Treasurer's Office has no duty or responsibility or liability to any party for the payment of benefits under the program, regardless of whether sufficient funds are available to pay such benefits. They can't guarantee any interest rate or rate of return on the investment performance of any contribution or account balance, and they are also not liable or responsible for any loss or adverse consequences that result from participating in the program. Section 537, confidentiality. The treasurer is required to establish policies and procedures that are consistent with the Vermont Public Records Act and other statutory provisions to ensure that participants' personal and confidential information confidential under the program. Section 538, accounting and reports. So there is a report due beginning January 15th, 2024, and then every year after, that the treasurer has to submit to the governor, House Commerce and Economic Development, this committee, as well as Senate Economic Development and Senate Government Operations. That provides information on the activities, operations, receipts, and expenditures of the program during the preceding calendar year, and then any other information regarding the program. The report has to include the number of participants, the investment options, rates of return, and the projected activities of the program for the current calendar year. Section 2 of the bill is the implementation schedule. So subsection A says that subject to an appropriation from the General Assembly, and currently there is one in the budget of $750,000. The program is administered under the following schedule. So beginning July 1st, 2025, all covered employees that have 25 or more employers with 25 or more employees shall offer the program to their employees. And the following January 2026, the covered employers with 15 to 24 covered employees have to offer the program to their covered employees. And then finally, beginning July 1st, 2026, covered employers with 5 to 14 covered employees offer the program to their covered employees.
Representative.
So going back up to accounting and reports, this is always a question regarding, the treasurer shall submit a report to us and other committees. Should that be specific to either a written report or verbal report? I mean, or if it's just a report good enough? Again, a lot of times those reports written fall by the wayside, and if you just get a regular update, they may have it in writing as well. But I'm just curious as to whether that's just going to be a report that's slipped into our, ledger web page or what it is. So,
Gavin, do you want to?
Well, I'll just say we're certainly happy to do a written report. We'd anticipate doing that internally as a matter of sort of good governance anyway, and always happy to come in and deliver an oral report and answer any questions that you have. And particularly in the early years, I think that would probably make good sense for lead questions. So I think, we're happy to do both.
great.
Representative Meyer.
So with the scaling in and requirement for employers to provide to covered employees, the last scaling is 5 to 14, so 1 to 4 employees.
That's
There's
not.
no requirement.
That's not addressed, and I could let the treasurer's office speak to that, but I think the idea is that employers with less than 5 employees can participate in the program, but they are waiting to see how other states are implementing those smaller employers into the program right now before they establish a process for that.
Okay, so if the employer wanted to get, a smaller, if they're a very small employer, they still could have access, it's just.
Exactly.
Correct, thank you.
If I can just put a slightly finer point on that, Becky's absolutely right. And in particular, we're looking at Oregon, which is currently rolling this out to all employers. 1 to 5.
Studies recommendations.
Let's keep going.
So section 3 is of the bill is repealing what was created in 2017 as the Green Mountain Secure Retirement Plan, which never got fully implemented. And so this program is essentially taking the place of that. And section 4, the effective date, the act takes effect on July 1st of this year.
Any questions for Becky about the words on the page? How we made it through? Took 2 minutes.
Top speed.
It was quick, just fragmented.
Yeah, we broke it up, Does anyone have any questions, concerns, thoughts, things we didn't get to ask Gavin or the treasurer? It just is so well constructed that we can't do any work on it. I can't believe that from this committee.
It's terrific, that's my problem. I dig it.
It's a sound piece of policy.
That's a better way to No.
So do you have a record sheet ready to go? Representative Hooper, please.
We envision this as being sort of constructed like a 457, people selecting where they're going to put money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What this has looked like in other states is there's typically a sort of initial 30-day period when someone's money first goes in, it's just held in a capital preservation fund. And then after that, they're defaulted into a target date fund, based on their age, basically. And they can choose any of a number of other funds, but it's a pretty straightforward selection of investments. The idea is sort of simplicity above all else.
Seeing any other hands? All right, I would entertain a motion to find S-135.
I would move.
Representative Hooper moves that we find Senate Bill S-135 favorable. Any further discussion?
You need to make at least one change to get the Senate.
You know, we're holding on to a lot of Senate bills here. We just significantly rewrote the last one we passed out. So maybe this will go the other direction.
Just kidding.
I understand your thought process, Representative Higley.
So this bill will be, assuming we find this favorable, will be referred to Ways and Means this afternoon, and so it has a couple of stops to make. Representative Byron has volunteered to be the reporter of the bill. I think given your history and your predecessor to this program, it's fitting.
It does feel right.
We haven't seen you up there since we did 127, or was it miscellaneous?
Miscellaneous booze.
Yeah.
It's been a little while. since
It's
I've
your
done a
turn.
thing. Yeah.
To make it a real challenge, we bind his hands.
Any other discussion? All right, the clerk shall commence the call roll.
Representative Byron.
Yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Vega.
Yes.
Representative Morgan.
Yes.
Representative Cooper Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Representative Chase.
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans.
Yes.
Representative Cooper Randolph. Representative Nugent.
Yes.
Representative Higley.
Yes,
Representative McCarthy.
Yes.
11-0-1.
We're a committee. That was very efficient. It's really nice when we have such a well-crafted piece of policy just come over from the Senate. We love that.
Enthusiastic about this one.
It'll be really great. In all seriousness, it's going to be really, really good for people to be able to save easily, no fees. Really, really good idea. So thank you all. So committee, there are a few things in play. And I think I want to take a little bit of time before we hit the floor to try to make some more progress on some of the dispatch questions. So we're going to, a couple of us who have been working with JFO and our colleagues in the Appropriations Committee are a little bit of way through discussing some ideas to bring the committee on that. I also have asked Director Senning to come and address some of our questions about ranked choice voting right after the floor. So we're going to adjourn and go off live for now, and then pick things back up when we're done before officially here. So please be prepared to work for a little while after the floor, and we'll try to get everything done by, I would say 4:45 at the latest is what I'm shooting for.